There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. The Secretary will read the first order of the day.
Debate on vote number 2, appropriation bill, Parliament.
I now want to invite the Speaker of the National Assembly to the podium. As the Speaker makes her way to the podium, I ask other members just to settle down.
Honorable House Chairperson Frolick, honorable members of the National Assembly, ladies and gentlemen. The role of Parliament is important in the life of any nation. It is a representative body that carries the hopes and aspirations of the people. It is a body that develops new laws, amend existing ones, and repeal those that are no longer needed. It is a body that holds the government to account for executive action. It is also an instrument that ensures that public resources are spent efficiently by the government to address the issues of the people. Parliament is an instrument that is at the disposal of citizens through which they can influence policy and legislation. When one reflects on the important role of Parliament, one will appreciate why those freedom-loving South Africans in 1955 in Kliptown, adopting the Freedom Charter, ensured that one of the first clauses would call for citizens' participation in their governance and said, I quote, "The people shall govern," close quote. Our democratic dispensation in 1994 and the finalization of our constitution in 1996 created a framework in which we now have a legislative arm of the state whose critical role will be that the voice of the people will be heard. As we celebrate the 30 years of freedom, we can look back at the achievements that this House has been able to make. Transformative legislation that has changed the lives of our people for the better has been crafted and passed by this very Parliament. It is through the interventions of those who went before us as pioneers of building this legislature that we have transparency such that our nation and beyond may have an opportunity to follow the debates that touch their lives and also observe how we as representatives are engaged in ensuring that their lives are made better than they were before. Sihlalo kunye namalunga alendlu kubalekela ukuthi ngisho ukuthi laba labengembi kwethu kulesindlu yaleshamthetho benda ngekubalekile ukuthi sikwati ukuthi khulumela ngetilimi tethu njengoba sathi ukuthi tonke tilimi tabemi balemzansi Afrika tivikelwe ngumthetho sisekelo. Sibonile ke kuleli viki lelidlule ngenkathi kunetingxoxo ukuthi kuke kwaba nenkinga yekuthi bantu bangakwati ukukhuluma ngetilimi tabo kahle. Ngithanda ukuthembisa ukuthi sitawuqhubeka nokwenda lokusemandleni ethu nangemali lekhona ukuthi wonke umuntu akwati ukuthi vakalisa ngelilwimi lwakhe. Ngicela ke babe mashadile nakini nina lenisiphethe njengabongqongqosho namasekela abo ukuthi ekuletheni kwemithetho leniyiletha la eParliament make nisite nathi Nkosi yami ukuthi kungabi ngelika George kuphela lolimi noma kungabi ngokaFader Meve kuphela nixube nje kube khona ngelinye ilanga lenikutheblisha ngesizulu ngesiswati ngesivenda njalo njalo kubonakala phela ukuthi tinvo setishintshile sengithi lesiphethe. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, public participation is the bedrock of how we engage our citizens to ensure that their views are taken on board in lawmaking, policy formulation, and other important decisions that this Parliament takes. We've had sectoral parliaments, we've had petitions being brought here, we've also had events such as Parliament Meets the People, as well as we do public hearings when we make laws or canvassing views on other important policy questions. These engagements help us to deepen our engagement with the citizens. 30 years has given us an opportunity to look back also on our achievements as this parliament saw as our weaknesses and the things that we need to improve. Ngingasho nje ukuthi lokunye lesakwenda siyileli parliament ukuthi kube netingxoxo ngesinye isikhathi letivunyelwayo kulama mini plenary la sitokwathi khona ukuthi sikhulume ngetinkinga letikhungethe imiphakathi yenu. Sitawuqhubeka ke nokwenda lokho ukuthi melunga alendlu athi makebuya emakhaya kuma constituencies awo eletha tindzaba lekufuneka sibhekane nato tikwati ukuthi kukhulunywe kungagcina nje kuphela njengoba siyesende kuma motion ukuthi ngelanga lelilandzelako siyawukhuluma lokhu naloku keje kungendeki. Honorable members, in order to ensure that Parliament undertake its oversight responsibility over the executive, timeous tabling of documents will assist committees in deliberating on issues brought before them. It would also be critical to ensure that engagement with the executive is improved and that the quality of responses to questions posed to the executive are able to assist members to undertake their oversight responsibilities. In the previous administration, we've also acknowledged that where ministers are not able to attend portfolio committees or even answering questions in this House, deputy ministers will be available to undertake this work. I will urge members of the executive, through you, our leader of government business, that this practice must continue so that there can be this dynamic relationship between the executive and the legislatures. Honorable members, the sixth administration started engagement with the National Treasury to address the funding model of Parliament. Careful consideration of our budget as this Parliament will show that it has been declining over time, which has had a negative impact on the work of Parliament. The banning of Parliament also added more stress and has affected our effectiveness as the House. House Chairperson, I want to indicate to you that last Friday, I held a meeting with Minister Marquee of Public Works to explore the possibility of getting the dome that has been used by the state for big events previously, like the funeral of late President Mandela. This is the asset of the state which can be put to good use. The minister has indicated to us that the dome is available and the department will now engage Parliament and the Ministry of Defense to ensure that we move this dome and construct it here so that from now on we can have a structure where we continue to meet as Parliament. We want to indicate to members that the reconstruction of new chamber is on course. On Thursday, we will be engaging with the DBSA together with Public Works to look at the timelines for the completion of this work. Members will continue to be briefed through the appropriate structures on progress. As we open the 7th Parliament, we've also experienced challenges of committees not being able to conduct their business due to space availability. While we have tried to improve, this remains an ongoing challenge that we must address. The availability of space for offices of members is another point that, going forward, we will address as this Parliament. House Chairperson, honourable members, building the capacity of members is critical for them to engage in meaningful work of Parliament. The initial onboarding and training of members has been necessary. However, we do need to ensure that members are also given enough tools of trade to do their work effectively. Subject-specific training is, again, another necessary element for capacitation of members. while at the same time, our budget needs to include study tours where members can also benchmark on other parliaments on the work that they do. The constituency offices is another area in which we are able to have a dynamic link between citizens, the legislature, and the government. The sixth administration ensured that such offices have now both an administrator and a field worker. However, this might need to be improved to ensure that where possible, we can use digital technologies to improve our work. Malunga ahloniphekile nawe sihlalo walendlu. Ngifuna kusho ukuthi kukhona tinhlaka letibitwa ngama chapter 9 no chapter 10 institution. Kubalekile ukuthi ukusebenta kwethu siyiparlamente naleto tinhlaka siyakwenda kube ngcono ngoba phela umsebenzi wabo ukuthi baxhase umsebenzi lesiwenzayo ukuze kukwati ukuthi sive sethu siye phambili kanye nalenkululeko lesayilwela ikwati kuviwa ngumuntu wonke. Kubalekile ke ukuthi tincomo kumbe phecelezi ngolika George ama recommendations abawaletha la eParliament siwabhekisise siwacubungule bese sikwati ukuthi lendlu iwavume iwasebenzise. Sihlalo khona sandla lengisibonako.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise just to express my appreciation for the use of the indigenous languages which was brought to this House.
Honourable Member, Honourable Kitama, that's not a point of order. Your speaker later in the debate can congratulate the speaker on what she said. It's not necessary to do that now. Thank you. Please proceed, Honourable Speaker.
Ngiyabonga sihlalo walendlu. Ngithanza ke manje ukuthi ngeke ngibuyele kokunye lokubalekile lokumsebenzi waleli parliament. Lowa ngumsebenzi wokuxhumana kwaleli parliament kanye nalezinye izinhlaka ezikhona kumazwe amanye lokulesikubita phecelezi ngelimi lika George sithi i-parliamentary democracy. This remains an important area of our work. Our participation in regional, continental, and international bodies ensures that we remain critical voices to advance our national interest as well as contribute to global peace and development. Honourable members, we will develop ways in which feedback on our engagements in these fora is deliberated upon by members and also ensures that those who attend such meetings are well prepared on the debates long before they leave. This will ensure that our participation in these forums becomes effective. House Chairperson, our function is to ratify international treaties and agreements. Going forward, this will require careful consideration by relevant committees before they are tabled for ratification in the Houses of Parliament. We need to be alive to the implications of such treaties and agreements and how they advance our national interest as well as global peace and development. House Chairperson and members, Parliament, through its international or parliamentary diplomacy, needs to scrutinize international trends, particularly on international trade, and see to what extent such can be used as a tool to improve our conditions economically, particularly when you look at non-trade barriers that sometimes are imposed by countries with whom we trade. It's important as Parliament not only to see this as work of the executive alone, but also as our responsibility. Chairperson, we need to advance our role in regional and continental structures, particularly in our region, SADC, and the Pan-African Parliament, which is an instrument of the African Union. Not only in respect of our participation, but also monitoring how our government implements some of these agreements that flow from these structures. House Chairperson, honourable members, the tabling of the budget of Parliament Vote 2 will enable us to focus on the key priorities, some which I've already highlighted in the speech. However, The Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislature Act requires that Parliament develops a new strategic plan within 6 months of the national elections. This process will allow the institution to concretize its priorities and outcomes for the 7th Parliament and to realign its resources to prioritize areas for Parliament. The 2024-25 budget to Parliament is set at 4.436 billion, and it includes the allocation for the refurbishment of the parliamentary buildings and facilities. I therefore table the budget vote 2 for your consideration, honourable members. I thank you.
Hey? Thank you. The next speaker is the Honorable Dlakude.
Ngiyabonga sihlalo wendlu lehloniphekile. Angibingelele ku somlomo walendlu lehloniphekile, ngibingelele futhi na kumhlonishwa sekela mongameli walelive nani bahlonishwa nonke ngiyanibingelela. Honorable House Chairperson, the Parliament for the better part of its existence has been a tribune of minority to assert their domination over the majority. The ANC over the past 30 years led a legislative reform which has transformed our country and laid a basis for the creation of a non-racial, non-sexist, united, democratic, and prosperous society. The laws that have been passed since 1994 are an expression of the interests of the people. The majority of the people in all corners of South Africa, as well as various social partners, have played a meaningful role in developing the South Africa we live in today. A nation with a constitution and legislative framework which protects our human rights, the rights of workers, protecting the vulnerable, and giving expression to the social and economic rights of all. The commitment to transforming our society is an ongoing process, and in the 6th Parliament, we passed 145 bills, which shows the ongoing process of transforming our society. Honourable House Chairperson, the 2024 national and provincial elections created an outcome that required political parties to work together to constitute a majority, which constituted the leadership of Parliament and the executive. For a national executive to exist, a majority should be constituted by political parties. Honourable House Chairperson, the ANC called for a government of national unity and provided the leadership required to constitute a government that should continue to advance the people's interest and promote and the promise of a better life envisaged by our Constitution. A number of aspects of the function of Parliament will require a shift to adapt to the changed conditions to ensure there is adequate support and systems for a functional Parliament. Honourable House Chairperson, an important function of Parliament is to oversee the executive branch and ensure accountability. This is a function that enables Parliament to advance the interests of the people and issues they want addressed. It is this function that also enables Parliament to intervene and recommend interventions to resolve problems. Honorable House Chairperson, strengthening the capacity to support oversight and accountability functions of Parliament is fundamental for public representatives to have an impact on communities. Parliament is relatively underfunded, but this function is critical to the work of Parliament and should be strengthened. Honorable House Chairperson, as Parliament, we oversight a government which is quite vast and complex. And for us to robustly do our oversight, we need enhanced capacity. We should continue to strengthen our relationship with institutions supporting democracy, as their reports resolve challenges and appraise Parliament of the insights of various challenges affecting government, society, and the political economy. Honorable House Chairperson, we need to continue engaging with the National Treasury to change the funding formula for Parliament. We believe that the Speaker and the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces will prioritize this matter. Honorable House Chairperson, the Judicial Commission on allegation of state capture and corruption, known as the Zondo Commission, made various findings on Parliament. And the Sixth Parliament has undertaken a comprehensive approach to respond to the various recommendations. The Seventh Parliament should continue to build on the work undertaken by previous democratic parliaments. Sihlalo lohloniphekile walendlu ngabhimbidwane ngeminyaka wa-2022 kuye kwaba nengoti lapho iParliamente lethu laliye lasha khona. Kepha lokho akuthikametanga umsebenzi weParliamente ukuthi lichubekele embili. Makomiti aqhubekile akwati ukuthi ahlangane athathe izinqumo letifanelekile. Sikhonile kuphasisa imitheshwana lethite lephasisiwe sikwatile ukuthi sihlangane na noma singakahlangani njengoba sihlangene namhla ukuthi sihlanganyele sisonke kepha umthetho loqhuba kuhanjiswa kwalendlu sibe sakwati ukuthi siqhubeke siuphasise umthetho lesivumela ukuthi sisebende ngokwebuchwepheshe besimanje. We welcome the redesign of Parliament to reflect the diversity of our nation and to have the required accessibility for persons with disabilities and other needs for an inclusive environment. Honorable House Chairperson, our work as Parliament should be rooted in our constituencies. We should strengthen constituency work and ensure we allocate sufficient resources and time for contact with people. Our method of functioning should increasingly involve public participation, and civic education must be strengthened to achieve high public participation. We must ensure all our people understand their rights and use petitions, submissions, public hearings, and letters to public representatives. South Africa must know parliamentary constituency offices and know that they are for everyone and are not just for party political members. Honorable House Chairperson, another critical matter is to ensure that we have adequate structures that meet the well-being needs of members of Parliament. We believe we need to continue pursuing resolution of the permit challenges in a sustainable manner that reduces the financial risk of Parliament. Honorable House Chairperson, we have always reached a consensus on Honorable House Chairperson, we have always reached consensus or constructively disagreed on matters in the past. We have also made our collective efforts to restore and maintain the decorum of the House. And we pledge our commitment as the ANC to work with the presiding officers and the administration of Parliament in the noble task of serving our nation and its people. To serve the people of South Africa is an honor. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you.
The ANC support the budget vote too.
The next speaker is the Honorable Mikalakis.
Honourable House Chairperson, those who have never been a part of Parliament will not understand and appreciate the crazy, unpredictable, wonderful place that it is. A degree of this is necessary and is normal. In my view, it's Parliament's own way of making sure that she retains those who respect her and spits out those who are here for the wrong reasons. A degree of chaos and clever confusion is needed. But there's a difference between parliamentary chaos and parliamentary decay. Over the last 10 or more years, and in particular since the fire of 2022, Parliament has not been the same. For more than 2 years, the last administration dragged its feet in clearing up and rebuilding our house, whilst in the city of Cape Town, brand new skyscrapers were going up in the same time. I regard today, where we have to assemble in a marquee in a parking lot, as a low point for Parliament. It is commendable, Madam Speaker, that you want to have our sittings fully in person after COVID-19, and I support this. But we need a proper and permanent place to have our assemblies, and we need it urgently. For Parliament to remain robust, we need to have in-person contact in every committee possible, and along with that, there is the issue of proper translation services. We must make affordable, effective translation services available in as many of our meetings as possible. And that will require that we have the facilities in place to do so. The money spent on hiring bays for translators could have covered the salaries of an extra few or made sure that we retain those we already have. It is a scarce skill and we need to look after these individuals. It does give me some consolation that the new Deputy Speaker spent a large part of her life advocating for translation services, both into other spoken languages as well as being a pioneer for sign language interpretation in South Africa. At this point, I wish to thank the staff members in every department of this massive institution who helped with the transition from the 6th Parliament to the 7th. Speaker, the dedication and institutional knowledge that we have here must be retained, and the only way to do this is if we look after the staff who care very deeply for the institution they have spent their professional lives trying to keep together. Apart from that, Madam Speaker, we need to ensure that Parliament becomes a conducive environment in which to work and to welcome visitors with pride. There are countless services and resources that have faded over the years with no explanation as to why the cost bill has not come down. Where are the services and where is the money? They can't both have disappeared. Madam Speaker, in terms of our operations itself, it is vital that we implement a more robust committee system where members are not simply left to ask once-off questions to departments and then the scrutiny is over. We need to implement a robust system of engaging the executive like we have done before in SCOPA and in the Justice Committee during the Thabo Bester investigation. Of course, this system is not appropriate at all times and for all business before the committees, but where appropriate, our committee chairpersons should allow for more freedom and engagement from members. Apart from that, it will now more than ever be important to ensure that the policy objectives and targets set by every department and as set out during the President's speech needs to be placed on the agendas of the portfolio committees and monitored closely. When it comes to oversight, it is first Parliament's duty to monitor closely the implementation and realization of these objectives, but also to ensure that we do from our side what we can to assist in making it a reality. Our other key function is that of legislation, where we must move to a point where members can meaningfully make a contribution. I am very aware of the fact that not all members are lawyers, but they don't have to be. We need, however, to provide new members with the necessary capacity to interpret laws and not merely parrot researchers inside Parliament and their parties. A final operational matter that must be prioritized in Parliament is the processing of petitions. It has been more than 12 years since the judgment in Ryansani versus Speaker caused the scrapping of the Petitions Committee as collateral damage for allowing members to bring private members' bills without permission. It cannot be that we are the only Parliament in the world where the Petitions Committee sits in the upper house that is representing the provinces and not in the lower house that represents the people directly. This and the review of our rules to make Parliament suitable for an era of coalitions will be vital in the coming years if we want to move forward. Madam Speaker, none of these challenges are impossible to overcome, and by overcoming them with each step, we will not only restore the dignity of Parliament, but also her ability to facilitate the working of our democracy in a tangible manner. Because it is here where our democracy really should come alive. House Chairperson, it's not only an archaic institution that is nice to have for traditionalists. It's based on the most robust and inquisitive parliamentary processes in the world, where the quirks serve a purpose, and it is vital that if we want to ensure that all our ideas and voices of the people, not only from the government, but also the opposition, is aired and considered. I and the DA caucus look forward to help make this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Douglas.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I'd like to thank everybody for this opportunity, and I want to thank Baba Zuma, first of all, for the opportunity for us as MK to be here. And Honourable Speaker, Honourable Members and fellow South Africans, I greet you all in the name of our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ, and I stand before you as a representative of Mkonto. The budget is more than a collection of numbers. It is a reflection of our nation's priorities, values, and commitment to transforming the lives of all South Africans, and having been deprived of the opportunity to have sight of all the documentation for a sufficient amount of time, we would like to officially vote against the adoption of this budget vote too. The Parliamentary Budget Office has provided us with an in-depth analysis of the 2024 Appropriations Bill, highlighting both the successes and shortcomings. As we deliberate on these appropriations, it is crucial to reflect on the past, particularly the tenure of the President Jacob Zuma.
Honourable Member, will you just take a seat? There's intervention.
Speaker.
Yes, Honourable Member.
With due respect, kindly reprimand the members of the GNU not to drown the speaker on the podium.
Thank you, Honourable
allow
Member.
him to finish his presentation. Thank you very
Honourable
much.
Honourable Members, it is indeed correct. You can interject, but the speaker at the podium must get a fair opportunity to make his speech. So keep interjections, keep it down, and do not allow the speaker not to be heard. From where we sit, it's difficult to follow the speaker when there is a lot of noise coming from the floor as well. Please continue, Honourable Member.
During President Zuma, the rightful president of South Africa's tenure, we saw unprecedented support for black businesses and black industrialists. As he once said, we need to radically transform the economy to include the black majority, which is not included by this ANC and GNU government. The vision translated into policies that empowered many black entrepreneurs and black industrialists program was launched under President Zuma's leadership. Black industrialists have benefited from his leadership, and millions of dollars have been given to them to start their businesses and access the economy. Our economy is owned by white monopoly capital. Since 1994, the economy was not given back to the owners of the land. It was not given back to who owned the land from the start. You see, the reality is that money can only be made for the appropriations of government through the taxpayers. But how did the taxpayers get that money? They got the money by appropriating the land from the indigenous people and African indigenous people without compensation to this day. In 1994, the land was never given back. The economy was never given back. You look at the short-term insurance industry. What happens there is that our people, colored, black, and all people of color get excluded from procurement opportunities by white monopoly capital. It's the same in every industry. We cannot access procurement opportunities because white monopoly capital owns every industry. Whether you go to mining, whether you go to any other thing, they own all of it. So when we talk about appropriations, let's talk about how the land was appropriated in the first place that these people are using to pay these taxes. That land was stolen from the regional landowners of this place. And it needs to be returned. And Mkonto is going to do that. In line with the PBL's mandate to scrutinize government expenditure, what is the detailed plan for rationalizing public entities? Despite significant budget allocations, disparities in higher education access remain stark. What new accountability members aligned with the PBO's oversight role are in place to ensure that funds are used effectively to bridge this gap? Reflecting on the BPO's concern about the efficient use of public funds, how will the budget address the delays in the national health insurance implementation and ensure timely progress? Public infrastructure investment is less than 2% of GDP against an NDP target of 10%. Where is the strategies to help us reach the targets of the NDP when it's now at 2%? Considering the PBO's role and considering the House's role and about appropriations, where is the role of this House in evaluating fiscal policies? How does the budget balance fiscal consolidation with the need for developmental spending, especially in light of South Africa's high levels of poverty and inequality? What specific reforms is the GNU going to bring to improve government spending efficiency? And what will be implemented by Treasury to enhance the utilization of conditional grants, particularly underperforming sectors like agriculture and health? What I want to say, honorable leaders, is that this appropriations...
Honorable Douglas, will you just take your seat? There's another intervention. Yes, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in terms of Rule 65, where a member is not to converse aloud while a member is speaking. The member across me, the Honorable Mantashe there, is conversing so loudly, he's disturbing the
Thank you, honorable member.
The member. So please
honorable members,
bring him to order in
honorable
terms of
members,
Rule 65. I thank you.
Honorable members, can we just observe the decorum of the House and let us keep the interjections, the noise level down. Please proceed, honorable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under President Zuma, South Africa embarked on a massive infrastructure project development, including the development of the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Project, investments in public transport systems like Ria Via bus service, Madupi Power Station, and many others. In the last 8 years, we have seen this government and the ANC government specifically take things backward and not forward. In the last 30
Order,
years,
honorable members.
in the last 30 years, we've had BRICS countries like China, like Russia, take their people out of poverty, whereas this government hasn't used the appropriations budget to take the people out of poverty. This government has used the appropriations budget to keep status quo, to keep the land and the economy in the hands of the same people who stole it from our people. Why is our people still living in the shacks and the townships around the corner when there's an appropriation bill in terms of housing? You guys should never have allowed our people to stay there for 30 years. You go to China, you'll go find cities being built for 5 to 10 million people every 5 years. We've had 30 years and we haven't built one new city under the ANC. And we will not build any new cities because you want to make our people comfortable in the dirt and in the filth of the townships. Our people suffer because there's no electricity. Our people suffer because there's no food.
Zuma did.
Mr. J?
Time up.
No. Let me speak on behalf of the people. You may want to talk the way you want to talk in Parliament, but I speak for the people. And the people on the ground, the colored people, the black people, all our people want answers from this House, and that's what MK is here to do. When are you going to build houses for our people and give our people jobs? When are you going to take our people out of poverty? Our people have to suffer to buy electricity, to buy bread, to buy food, to buy milk. And you guys are busy talking here about big picture macro things. No, this is going to end in this House. The land must come back to its rightful owners. And the rightful owners will take our people out of poverty. We will use the mineral resources of this land to take our people out of poverty. We will not let the white people take that land and use it to make more boats and more cars and have nice suits like they're sitting here in the DA. Nice German cars, nice suits. Julle kan mooi lyk, maar dat geld komt van bloedgeld af. Dat geld komt van die bloed van die mensen. Die bloed van die koeie en die sand. Die bloed van allemaal vir ons mense wat julle doodgemaak het. Julle sit hier met 'n smile op julle gesig. Maar julle is niks nie, julle is moordenaars. Julle het ons mense doodgemaak. Maar julle sit hier en julle kom met julle GNU. Dat ek vir julle sê, die mense wil ons land terug hê. Ons wil ons mense uit die armoede uitvat. Ons wil ons mense die myne terug gee. Tell them! We want our people to have a life of freedom. and talking just about all this stuff. Yes, been a member of parliament before. I can talk to everything in terms of appropriations. But things must change. It cannot stay the same. The land must come back, and MK will take over and return the land to its rightful owners so that people can come out of poverty. Kwaza Mkonto, Kwaza.
But you're wearing a nice suit yourself.
No, honorable members. Honorable members, can you just settle down, please? Order, honorable members. Honorable members, what you are doing is unacceptable. Order. Honorable members. Honorable members. What you are doing is unacceptable. This is a sitting of the National Assembly. Order. And the rules of the National Assembly apply. For instance, you can't sit where you're sitting and just switch on your microphone and then you start making commentary. You cannot do that. Honorable member, I've not asked you for your opinion. I'm now addressing the House, and one of the rules clearly state that when a presiding officer addresses the House, you shall not interfere with what the presiding officer is saying. I'm referring to all members in the House. I also want to remind the honorable members of a rule that states that if a member at the podium delivers a speech, you cannot drown that member. You cannot sit and do ongoing commentary. I'm going to call you out. I will identify you, and if necessary, I will ask you to leave the House. We are not going to continue like this. The next speaker is the Honorable Maotwe.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Speaker, we must state outrightly that we reject this budget. The Parliament we were introduced to 10 years ago was very efficient in aiding our work to hold the executive accountable. Our deepest worry, Chair, relates to the competence of the Secretary of Parliament. Never before has the joint sitting been delayed by over 30 minutes over a simple issue of electricity. The chaos and total disorganization that characterized the first week of Parliament included double booking of venues, absence of translation services in mini plenaries, and lack of equipment such as sound and broadcasting services. Today, we are debating under a Marquee, which we have long asked for, particularly a dome Marquee as a temporary structure of Parliament, and we have it because it was bought during the funeral of President Mandela. This Secretary has not demonstrated competence on this and arranging of venues. The Parliament building burnt down over 2 years ago, and all that we were told was that they were removing rubble for 2 years. We still do not have a plan for a temporary structure whilst the rebuilding is taking place. The NA building burnt down because its health and safety standards were not in place. As we speak, it does not look like other buildings of Parliament like Mark's building or the NCOP has improved its health and safety standards to be insulated from fire or other disasters. They are even still under-maintained. House Chair, with the current Secretary who earns over 4 million per annum, which was upgraded from just a mere over 2 million, we do not think the crucial project of rebuilding Parliament will happen with the much-needed speed and quality. There is no believable plan that it takes his work very seriously. Chair, we continue to call on Parliament to relocate to Tshwane in the capital city. The legislative and executive houses must be in one city, preferably Gauteng, which is much more accessible to the people across the country than this Cape. The advent of fire should have given us the opportunity to relocate, which will save a lot of money in running the house. Already, when we was asked about constructing a temporary structure here for Parliament, he kept bringing a proposal that will cost over 600 million to just bring this structure here. That is very suspicious, but it tells you that actually Tshwane should be the only option. Many of our members, over 50% of which are new MPs, have not received their gadgets to connect with their constituencies. Parliament has been open for over a month. Of course, more budget allocation should be given to build more extensive support for MPs to do their legislative work, in particular, the Bills Office, which also gives support for private member bills. Our concrete proposal as the EFF is that additional to playing a leading role in different international forums such as PAP, SADC, and Interparliamentary Union, the 7th Parliament must play a leading role in the BRICS Parliamentary Forum and make sure that its engagements and meetings take place from time to time. This is to provide adequate oversight of the developments in light of the changing and dynamic global balance of forces. Yet, it is a fact that this GNU, the government of Dinonyane, which was formed by the white capitalist establishment, hoped to bring everybody into a signed alliance with the national executive, thus extinguishing the opposition. It seeks to mask the contradictions of race and gender that the ruling elite has failed to resolve since the dawn of our democratic society. It sought to silence the voices of the oppressed on the urgent need for land and economic freedom in our lifetime. The decision by MK, EFF, ATM, NCC, and UAT in particular to resist and stay in the opposition benches is not only revolutionary, it is the best act in the defense of the Constitution and its founding value of a multi-party system of democracy. Our constitutional duty as Parliament is not to aid the executive or protect it or advance its interests. For 30 years, one single party has dominated these benches, using its majority to undermine scrutiny on the executive and accountability. The tyranny of the majority was seen in action recently in the suppression of the pallapala impeachment, where the sitting president must come and answer about the reported abuses of power and possible human rights violations. Chair, today, this tyranny is continuing in the form of GNU. Many in GNU ranks have attempted to demonize those who chose to stay out of the government of Dinonyane, seeking to paint them as divisive and unconstitutional. But this band of semi-illiterates, ex-convicts, and waffling careerists know nothing about the Constitution, particularly its founding ideological arsenal. They don't see that the Progressive Caucus is the best development in strengthening parliamentary oversight. We must state categorically clear that to criticize the executive is a constitutional duty. The GNU, which commands close to 70% of the House, wants to operate without criticism. They want a situation in which they are the executive and the oversight. Eliminating opposition, what a crying shame. They were already using the against-our majority to force committees to adopt APPs and budget of departments without scrutiny, in a process of prioritizing the executive and using Parliament as a mere rubber stamp. We have scored few victories as the Progressive Caucus on the new rules on speaking and sitting arrangements, as well as definitions of majority and opposition. We will still fight to integrate it in the rules that Parliament committees must be chaired by members whose political parties are not represented in the executive. Chair, we must reiterate that the people of South Africa shall govern. The voices of the people of South Africa shall be heard. We will not be suppressed here in this Parliament. Thank you.
The next speaker is the Honourable Adebe.
Honourable Chairperson, the ongoing repairs to the National Assembly chamber following the devastating fire in January 2022 have led to a second consecutive year of the State of the Nation address, the budget speech and other major plenary sittings being held outside the parliamentary precinct. Today, our legislature plenary session and debate takes place in a tent. We shouldn't be proud of a tent. Who would have thought that this is where our legislative arm of state would be confined to? This situation has exposed our weakness in reacting swiftly as an institution when times of disaster strike us. In many ways, we draw parallel to many departments in South Africa that also face such weaknesses. We need to make tough decisions about what we should do to rebuild this parliament. We must fast track the reconstruction of parliament, budget accordingly, and exercise due diligence. After all, this is a key public institution and one that is the guardian of the lives of South Africans. While the use of Cape Town City Hall, Cape Town ICC and the Cape Good of Hope building have been a necessary patch, it is clear that these arrangements are insufficient for the long-term needs of Parliament. Years ago, there was a proposal to build additional offices on this very piece of land, and maybe today we should revive this proposal once more. Hybrid sittings are incredibly complex, with some members facing challenges beyond our control when it comes to time to deliver their speeches. However, at the same time, I must applaud the parliamentary staff who work in the background and the table staff who run things seamlessly even when chaos may break out. Unfortunately, I think the budget has missed the need for the construction of new buildings alongside the revival of the old ones. The budget cuts of all arms of state are understandably a reflection of the poor economic situation the country is in. We must look to the future and plan for a capable and revitalized state. Under the cloak of the GNU, it is no better time to come to the table and make proposals on how the future of Parliament develops. However, we must not merely look for superficial developments. We must plan to address the criticism of where Parliament falls short in its mandate and use the room for improvement. Part of this improvement, but something that should be done with greater urgency, is Parliament's Wi-Fi and connectivity. We must understand that the current limitation is that where there is an abundance of users, the speed slows down. However, we are an institution that on any day has a few thousand people on the premises. So we must find a solution to Wi-Fi challenges on the precinct and the parks. On the matter of committees, the IFP calls for greater capacity to be given to them with regard to oversight and study tours. The committees need to spend more time investigating and probing entities who rush close reports together in an attempt to pull the wool over the committee's eyes. By the end of this year, Parliament should have committees that have KPIs that require a certain number of oversight visits per year. Our committees are needed to drive the change of each entity, and the GNU will not succeed unless Parliament plays its role in driving the change of thinking within our departments and entities. We must continue to build capacity and professional departments in this country, and committees have the power to bring about this change if given more capacity in terms of funding. Honorable Chairperson, considering the comments made, the IFP support budget vote 2. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Kojani. May I remind the honourable members to use the waiting chairs on both sides of the podium so that we can have a smooth process as far as the speakers list is concerned. Honourable Kojani.
Thank you very much, and my apologies for that. Good afternoon, Honourable Deputy President, Madam Speaker, House Chairperson, honourable members. In this new political era, we as the Patriotic Alliance will applaud the President, Honourable Ramaphosa, on the government of national unity. And though we have not always agreed on everything, however, we have now reached a unanimous consensus in order to move our country forward. The current formation means that the GNU parties have set aside their differences in order to rebuild and grow South Africa and instill renewed hope into our people. As a newly elected and young member of Parliament, it is imperative that we are fully equipped to serve our communities and our country as a whole. We implore that there should be continuous and vigorous training of MPs and that we are allowed sufficient time to scrutinize documentation and reports in our committees. As the Patriotic Alliance, we also strive for transparency, as you would have seen from our Minister Mackenzie. We also strive for inclusion of the public in all parliamentary proceedings. We seek to educate, include, especially the most vulnerable, marginalized, and poorest people, so that our leaders of tomorrow can take the country forward even more. From the 3rd to the 6th Parliament, there was an increased focus on public participation and oversight. We acknowledge and appreciate that proceedings are more accessible to people via social media, but we ask that there is further effective sharing from Parliament to citizens in the form of parliamentary media channels so that they can stay up to date. Parliament also needs to use more official languages in order to disseminate information to the public and increase the public hearings on the ground. This will facilitate a more personal and culture-centered setting that focuses on the values, the beliefs, and also the cultural heritage of a specific community. During the 6th Parliament, there was a decision to launch reinvigorated constituency offices, and we will need to see this implemented in the 7th Parliament so that all of our communities can reach us with ease. As we now move from a business-as-usual approach, we are now focusing more on impacts and outcomes. Members of Parliament should be held to account for non-performance, and this should be treated and dealt with swiftly. This also speaks directly to the operational excellence, which is the most important theme of the macro framework of the 7th Parliament. National, provincial, and local spheres of government are distinctive, interrelated, and interdependent. Thus, the one cannot operate without the other. If we foster a culture of collegiality, being reminded that all of our constituencies in this joint house, our mandates are to deliver services to them, then we can all agree that we cannot waste any more time on fruitless bickering. Members of Parliament are not above ordinary citizens. We must not forget the impoverished streets that we come from. We are in the service of citizens, and we remain so until we take our leave from the Assembly. With that note, I would like to say, as the Patriotic Alliance, we do support the budget for Parliament, and we trust that the parties of the GNU, as well as other parties, will work together through our positions for the betterment of this country. Let the parties who focus on the past, and the rest of us join hands in order to rebuild this country into the rainbow nation that the Honorable, the former President and global icon Nelson Mandela envisioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Wessels.
Thank you, Honourable House Chairperson. House Chair, this place is and belongs to the people. Each seat in this Parliament belongs to the people. We are and should be the voice of the people. And we shouldn't be a rubber stamp. We shouldn't be reduced to a rubber stamp. It is unacceptable and also an impediment to our constitutional democracy that the majority of legislation originates from the executive. Private members' bills should not be born dead, but should play an important role. And committees should be proactive to realize and to see the voids in legislation, also outdated legislation, and to bring about the necessary amendments before the executive does that. This place necessitates oversight. That's our role. That is our duty, to ensure that there's accountability towards the people of South Africa. But to ensure oversight and accountability, there must be rules in this House. There must be rules in Parliament. There must be decorum. It is a shame that the conduct of many members, especially during the past term, actually makes today's setting of a tent quite profound, because the circus is in a tent. And let us, during this next term, avoid being a circus, but setting an example to the people out there of providing real oversight and being the voice to and for the people.
Yes, honourable member.
Can the honourable member stop mumbling and tell
No,
us
honourable member,
when
that's
he's
not
returning the
that's
land
not
they stole
that's,
from us?
That's not
We
relevant
represent
to this
land
debate.
thieves. When
Honourable
are they
member, you
giving
are out
us
of
back
order.
Our land?
Honourable
and also
member,
paying reparations
for the second
for the
time, you are
genocide
out
against
of
the Khoi
order.
and the San.
Honourable member, I now want to formally caution you that you must first ask to be recognized, and then thereafter you must, in terms of the rules, state what the point of order is. It's a point for debate that you can exercise at another point, now not for this purpose, please. Please proceed, honourable member.
Thank you, House Chairperson. I
Honourable
won't react.
Wessels, will you take your seat, please? Yes, honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in terms of Rule 64. The Speaker has to exercise decorum in the House. He mentions that this is a circus. He is part of this. You must withdraw that. Is
Honourable
he inclined-
member, I
is he
will
a
consult.
clown? Are
I
we
will
clowns
consult
here,
Hansard.
or what is it?
Thank
You'll
you.
have to withdraw that.
Thank you. Honourable Wessels, that
Like
you
Mr.
refer
Bean.
to
Mr. Bean is
this.
in the House.
Honourable member. Honourable member, this is also a formal caution to you now. You were recognized, you raised your point of order, I listened to it, and then you simply continued after that. Next time I'm going to ask you to leave the proceedings. Honourable Wessels, that you refer to this sitting as a circus.
Now, Chairperson, I said the conduct of certain members
I'll
makes it
check,
fitting.
I'll check the answer. You may proceed.
Thank you, House Chairperson. It is true, Honourable Speaker, through you, House Chair, that we do have budget constraints. As the Honourable Khadebe put it, the whole South Africa is in an economic crisis. And Parliament will have to learn to do more with less. We do welcome the fact that we will get a more permanent temporary venue and housing for the National Assembly. That's welcomed. Let me get to the Honourable Douglas. Agbare Douglas, u sien, u rassepolarisasie maak dat hierdie huis nie werklike oorsig kan doen nie. Wanneer u 'n stem vir die mense is, moet u 'n verantwoordelike stem wees. En daardeur moet u vir die mense daar buite wys dat u hier is om u grondwetlike taak te vervul. En laat ek ook vir u sê, agbare Douglas, as u my eiendom wil kom vat, sal u sien wat gebeur. Ek dank u.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will now invite Honourable Ngobeni from ActionSA. Honourable members, order, honourable members. Please, can we keep it low? Honourable members, please, can we give the speaker on the podium a platform to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Leader of Government Business, the Deputy President Paul Mashatile, Intlakane, honourable members, Dumelang. Madam Speaker, regrettably, ActionSA does not support this inadequate budget. The past few weeks following the late constitution of the Cabinet have forced us into a rushed process. Committee reports, departmental APPs and budgets have been delayed, and many of us still do not have our tools of trade. Even making this submission feels inadequate as documents were sent just this morning. Sudden influxes of information prevent us from making well-informed decisions and substantive submissions. We hope that this will not continue. Honourable members, this Parliament must function as a bastion of innovation, leadership, and competent management, and so we need adequate resources. Skilled personnel and modern infrastructure are necessary for Parliament to scrutinize legislation and hold the executive to account. Without these, our ability to perform our constitutional duties is severely handicapped, undermining the democratic process and principles upon which our nation stands. Our efforts must improve meaningful engagement with South Africans, ensuring that citizens are well-informed, actively involved, and heard. ActionSA believes that this 7th Parliament must be a vigorous centre of critical engagement, upholding transparency and accountability, areas where previous parliaments have often fallen short. We all listen intently, especially those of us who are new to this House, during the presentation on ethics at our induction. It is then curious if the standards are set so high that as they were presented in that induction, why then do we have members here with questionable ethics, character, and records? Furthermore, what is the update regarding those truly responsible for the parliamentary building burning down? Honourable members, the stakes are simply too high this time around. House Chairperson, the 7th Parliament has an urgent obligation to the South African people to reset the status quo and move away from being a mere rubber stamping exercise for the executive. Reflecting on the State of Capture Commission report, the need for robust oversight and accountability is pressing to prevent a repeat of past failures. As ActionSA, we are unwaveringly committed to ensuring that Parliament's performance framework for oversight and accountability is not just words on paper, but marks a genuine, trustworthy overhaul. We have committed to not opposing for opposition's sake, and with these preliminary observations, ActionSA can only agree with elements of this budget framework that prioritize robust oversight and accountability so that we can dispel the notion that Parliament is cumbersome. Making this Parliament work is our collective responsibility, and so we implore this House not to squander this new opportunity to build a Parliament that truly serves the people, upholds justice, and embodies integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will now call House Chairperson Honourable Hon. Please wait, Honourable Hon. Yes, Honourable Member. Borrow a mic next to you.
Nongabonga speak. Bengingafuna ukuphazamisa umhlonishelo dekhuluma manje. Kodwa ispeaker lese esiphumile lapha ya. Sithe ngeAfrikaans mas sithi sifuna umhlaba sobona. Sikuthatha njenge threat lokho ngicela uconsult iHandsight noma yini leni consultayo ukulalela ukuthi bethini. Sikuthatha njenge threat lokho and highly offensive and unparliamentary. So kindly look into that and come back to us in this same plenary. Thank you.
Okay, Honourable Member, we'll do that. I'm not sure which speaker you are talking about. At least if you would... There is no member that is called Mr. Bean. Please be in order. You can't do that. Honourable members, you are not allowed to discriminate against another member or call funny names on another member. It is wrong. I can't consult Hansard without knowing which member you are referring to.
Speak. It was a member before the latter, so kindly consult
Okay.
your
All right, thank you.
pre-speaker before you.
Thank. Please note that when we will consult Hansard, it will not be a response that you will get today, which means tomorrow on the sitting, whichever House Chairperson will be there, will then come back with a response. Thank you very much. Honourable Hon. There's another hand. Yes, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Honourable House Chairperson. I rise on Rule 92, which speaks to points of order. I just request that because we've noted members of the opposition just raising hands and not stating which rules they are standing on, and the rules actually do dictate that a member must state which rule they are standing on before they're recognized to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Hon, please take the podium.
Thank you, House Chair. It has rightly been said that parliamentary debates are the cornerstone of a truly vibrant democracy. These public debates are an important part of parliamentary scrutiny of executive actions and decisions. Without debate and discussion, a democracy is reduced to a body without a soul. Malcolm X reflected on the unique opportunity that comes with any debate in his autobiography, and I quote, "Standing up there, the faces looking up at me, the things in my head coming out of my mouth, while my brain searched for the next best thing to follow what I was saying. And if I could sway them to my side by handling it right, then I had won the debate. End of quote. House Chair, winning debates will of course be very important to all parties and members who participate in debates over the next 5 years. And of course, it's not necessarily the outcome of a vote, if such a vote is required by the rules at the end of a debate, which indicates who has really won the debate. In some instances, it may happen that quite clearly those holding a minority view put forward arguments which are more convincing than those who hold a majority view. The only consolation in such instances is, of course, and in a democracy, where the one certainty we all have is the regularity of elections every 5 years. This should not be a small consolation. That consolation is that if majority decisions are taken without a moral basis, without being able to win the debate before a vote, the real adjudicators of who is winning debates are never impressed. South Africans, our principals, want to see us having proper, meaningful debates about the issues they care about, matters that affect the quality of their lives. It is for this reason that they have sent us here, all of us, as individual members and as a collective. Madam House Chair, to enable debate, members must enjoy freedom of speech, a right only limited and regulated by our rules. So therefore, when our rules prohibit us from insulting one another and from using abusive and offensive language, it's about upholding the dignity and the integrity of this institution, but also about assisting us to remember that debates are won and lost on the merit of arguments and not by the ability or willingness to insult or offend. This is true for both sides of this House, and there is, of course, also the possibility that the non-responsiveness and evasiveness of the executive could justifiably add to frustration. Therefore, if we are to build public trust and confidence in this, our National Assembly, we must all be mindful of the negative impact both the lack of decorum and the lack of a true culture of accountability will have in this regard. We accept that this is the task of not only members and parties represented in this House, but also that of the presiding officers. Madam Chair, as the House Chair responsible for internal arrangements, I commit to be available to listen to the concerns of members and to try and help establish a conducive working environment. The well-being of members is not a given. While there's of course the argument out there that because we are all well remunerated and because we enjoy travel and accommodation benefits of a not insignificant monetary value and scope, the reality is that this in itself will not guarantee the well-being, continued development and effectiveness of individual members. Special care will have to be taken to ensure that this Parliament is an inclusive institution. Therefore, we will work with all stakeholders relevant to ensuring the well-being of members. The optimal and ethical use of travel privileges we enjoy, as well as other members' facilities, are and will remain important. Similarly, we will endeavour to work with members and the leadership of parties to ensure that every member, whether a returning member or a first-termer, is afforded the necessary support and opportunity to declare fully their interests when the time comes. There is no reason why all members should not discharge of this duty, and we hope to not be faced by any failures in this regard. Madam Chair, both the burning down of the National Assembly, which others have referred to today, and the COVID-19 pandemic have unfortunately not only seriously damaged the buildings of Parliament, but also disrupted Parliament as an institution. The presiding officers with the Secretariat of Parliament can therefore not allow any further delays in the rebuilding of this institution, both the brick and mortar, but also the institution as the people. In this regard, we welcome and appreciate the assertiveness already shown by the Speaker in this regard. While we accept that Parliament and members of Parliament, even as a new administration, is to take co-responsibility for the fiscal constraints that is a reality in our country, and can therefore not even for a millisecond think of being exempted from the impact thereof. The reality is that this cannot excuse some of the inefficiencies that has crept into this precinct and the parliamentary villages where most of us spent much time. Last week during the mini plenaries, in which we debated the different budget votes, a constant theme was the need to do more with less. But, Madam House Chair, certainly this cannot mean that some of the basic services which we as members and even visitors to this Parliament are entitled to can be delivered poorly. A simple example in this regard is the state of some of the bathroom facilities in Parliament, where more often than not basics like hand washing soap and even hand drying facilities are not there. No budgetary constraints can allow for a situation where the existing infrastructure, both on the parliamentary precinct or in the parliamentary villages, is allowed to fall into a state of disrepair due to a lack of maintenance, to the point that it would ultimately require replacement. This is the type of maladministration that must be rooted out in our management of public facilities. Therefore, we will embark on a process together with the different management forums to ensure that management agreements are properly implemented on a value for money basis. And where delivery areas are not covered by agreements, we will work with public service to ensure that there's no loopholes, deficiencies, and weaknesses. Madam House Chair, in conclusion, our message to the executive in this regard is, while we as legislators do not carry any sword in any fight for luxury, an urgent need exists for basic maintenance of infrastructure, a need that must be addressed both because it's needed to preserve assets belonging to the public, but also because it partially informs the well-being of members. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Hon. I will now invite Honourable Swart, ACDP.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, many speakers have referred to the imperative of Parliament exercising oversight and accountability over the executive, and we from the ACDP fully support that we need an improvement of oversight and accountability. When one has regard to the Zondo Commission, it found then that Parliament was severely wanting in exercising that effective parliamentary oversight, and that this contributed to state capture and corruption. Madam Speaker, Chair, through you to Madam Speaker, we had some very effective parliamentary inquiries. If one has regard to the ESCOM parliamentary inquiry, that was not a case of a department coming and making a presentation and each one asks a question. There we were given an hour, each MP, to engage deeply into those issues. Similar with the Thabo Bester inquiry. And I would urge you, Chair, Madam Speaker, that we have similar deep-rooted inquiries, because the pursuit of effective oversight, it must be tireless and rigorous, constructive and evidence-based. And it must be to allow us to ask the tough questions. But one needs follow-up questions. You need to be able to cross-examine and get to the heart of a matter. And I'm sure that that is something we can really emphasize in this Parliament. But, Chair, we have not started very well, given the extraordinary haste with which the departmental APPs and budgets had to be considered to meet the deadline, the statutory deadline, at the end of July. Now, the ACDP proposes that the statutory deadline to finalize the budget should be amended, particularly in an election year, to avoid such a recurrence. Chairperson, the ACDP has chosen not to be part of the GNU at this stage, and we choose to align ourselves with those who wish to build as we put South Africa first. And we wish, let us make it very clear, we pray and wish the GNU every success, because its success will be the nation's success. There is, however, there's a need for a centrist, constructive opposition caucus. That is the role the ACDP has played over the years, and that is the role we will continue to play. And as we are starting to rebuild the walls of our fire-ravaged Parliament, may we also start rebuilding and restoring the moral fibre of our nation. If one has regard to the tree design of the new Parliament, may this 7th Parliament indeed be a symbol of the tree of life, whose leaves will, we pray, be for the healing of our nation, ravaged by crime and violence, high levels of unemployment and poverty, racism, and may it be healing, the tree, may the leaves be healing for nations around us. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a long fulfilled is a tree of life. Let us work together to fulfill the hope for all our citizens. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Kwankwa, UDM.
Molweni torha nanzukhumsha duke mnaki. Ingxaki iqala kule nto uba ndithetha i-3 minutes ngathi ndilinqalatha iyoqhina eqhuqwala. Kodwa kudala silapha sikwi-GNU. Okwesibini, Speaker, le nto le construction yethu iyandixaka mna. Sithetha ngekati esengxoweni because you are talking about 4 billion rands, and the challenge specifically has to do with the reconstruction of Parliament. Because kudala siyicela le presentation ba mayize kuthi ayidifike. Siyavuya ke hayi uapprove ntoni andingxamanga, uapprove njani ungekaboni. Ndiza kuphikisa ke mna ke. Okwesibini kukho le nto le funding yeParliament kunini siyixikozela uSpeaker isenguSpeaker Baleka Mbete sithetha into enye sixhensa ndawonye ingathi siligqirha eliphoswe ngumhlola. Asizi nanto ebambekayo. Ndidikiwe le nto iyo neParliament in particular ko progress apha simane sifundekela siye ezimeetingini singayiboni le progress. Okwesibini, public hearings should not be public hearings, especially the finance apha eParliament zisoloko izinto zabelungu. Abantu abakwazi isingesi esikhulu because asikwazanga ubenza abantu bethu bakwazi understand umsebenzi weParliament in particular so that they can be able to influence the processes of Parliament. Ndiyabava abathe bethuna ndizawubuya ngawe. Omnye umcimbi ofuna ubaluleke Speaker is we need to determine a proper process flow of how we process lama budget votes so that singabe nesiqweqwediso apha ingathi inqalathela account athu umkhwetha entabeni. Sikwazi ukuyazi kakuhle ukuthi what is the process flow nabo xa besithi ngoku hayi sizaw-announce i-cabinet bakwazi uyazi ukuthi there's a process that Parliament follows with clear time frames of how to process these things. Kuba xa bufunde ezi reports, most of them had no substance, primarily because their members are new, they had not been workshopped, they didn't understand the issues around as portfolios are different. Bendikhona amasela. The other issue is the structure of the Pambanhlale Phansi Speaker. I think the other issue has to do with translation. Dililo kalok number ndikwi-GNU andinitsho. Language editing for reports is also particularly important because yancedisa ezi reports is consunywa napha ngaphandle, Minister. Speaker, that's very important. The other issue here is we had a problem in the past, especially in the last term, where the Speaker had to prevail on members of the executive to answer questions. Perhaps in future we need to actually adopt a rule, I think it's in Ghana, where there would be a motion of censure to a member of the executive, show some truant conduct when it comes to that. But that would actually be a rule that we can debate here in Parliament. Okokugqibela phamba ndihlale phansi. Speaker nzani gada mna ndifaka ngadami kuba ndikwi-GNU.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Ghana from Rise. Order, Honorable Members. Can we give a member on the podium an opportunity to speak?
Honorable Members. We have been elected to represent the people of our country and to ensure a government based on the will of the people. We are the People's Parliament. It is our job collectively and individually to pass legislation and scrutinize and oversee the actions of the executive. Our democracy will work when the people participate. Parliament will work when the people of this country participate. Thus, we need to use this budget to get the people of our country participating in the affairs of this Parliament. Public participation should not be done merely to comply with legislation. It needs to be done meaningfully, and it needs to be preceded with public education. We need to use the budget to educate the public about the work we do in this House and how it affects the lives of our fellow South Africans, especially those that are yet to taste the fruits of our democracy. We need to use this budget to counter disinformation and misinformation about our constitutional democracy and the work that this Parliament does. The voters who sent us here want to see the best of South Africa in us. As Rise Mzansi, we do not take this responsibility lightly. we have committed to use our positions in Parliament to serve with honesty and integrity, to be serious in how we do our jobs as parliamentarians. South Africans don't expect from us to see theatrics in this house. They expect us to take ourselves seriously. They expect us to take them seriously. As Ryansani, we have committed to cooperate with other political parties and parliamentarians. For us, the color of the T-shirt one wore during the campaign will not matter, as long as what we do is for the benefit of all South Africans. Tatala Mashatile, in this administration, we want to see a closer working relationship between the executive and parliament. We expect to see ministers and deputy ministers available to account to portfolio committees and to this parliament. It is not a favor. That's what every one of you signed up for. Given that many of the members, some of the members in the executive were in the opposition benches in the last term, we expect them to answer questions timeously and give quality answers as they know the frustrations. We all remember the criticism that Parliament endured both in the Nkandla judgment and the Zondo Commission. We can't afford to repeat the same mistakes. I can assure you, Madam Speaker, that we as Ryansani, we will not use our positions to protect the President, Deputy President, and the ministers who do not take their responsibilities seriously. And we will support this budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will now invite Honorable Webster from BOSA.
House Chairperson, honorable members, good afternoon. For years, I watched parliamentary debates as an ordinary citizen, debates that were mostly filled with petty exchanges, personal vendettas, and political protectionism, and often wondered, when will the work of this parliament become about us as ordinary citizens? Today, we stand at a critical moment in our country when there are too many homes where there's not even one job, where the impacts and effects of crime have us paralyzed in fear, where there are too many young people whose future has been stolen by an education system that does not set them up to survive in a competitive world. Now more than ever, the work of this august House must be about the people, the 61 million South Africans. But Parliament will only serve the 61 million South Africans when we have politicians who stand on principle, who are not swayed by the promise of power, relevance, or proximity to wealth. Recent responses to the President's failed promises show that what was a former opposition has become a product of transactions of power, relevance, and proximity to wealth. Just the other day, the DA was campaigning for a trimmed cabinet of 15 ministries, a few deputy ministers, and a cut cabinet perks bill. But today, that has vanished from the agenda. There are other matters that have vanished from the agenda which cannot be swept under the carpet. Matters of national importance under the previous administration, such as state capture and its reports, and these must be revived. The GNU has an unintended consequence, and that is of weakening Parliament's accountability role. Currently, 70% of Parliament is part of the GNU, and we must avoid sacrificing accountability for government unity. If indeed it is to be about the 61 million, Parliament's rules need amending to reflect the new political composition of the National Assembly. The 804 million rand budget for legislation and oversight cannot be wasted by allowing government to perform oversight functions over itself. If it is to be about the 61 million, constituency work must be strengthened as a key part of MP's scope. Time spent in constituencies with citizens, listening to and resolving issues is critical. The budget should reflect this, and more should be given to constituency work. Finally, as Bill 1SA, we support the establishment of a standing committee on the presidency, because if it is to be about the 61 million, the President, as the head of the executive, should too be better held to accountability by Parliament. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Zungula from ATM.
Ma ndithathe eli thuba Ndibulise iinkokheli ezithembekileyo ze-Progressive Caucus. There is this growing narrative, particularly from the right-wing parties, who claim to be pro-constitution but are driving an anti-constitutional agenda. The portrayal of a progressive opposition parties as disruptors is fueled by anti-constitutional propaganda aimed at undermining the essential role of opposition in a constitutional democracy. Mainstream media has also contributed to perpetuating this narrative. Anyone who wants to build this country should welcome the opposition, particularly because they know the importance of having an opposition in terms of ensuring that there's going to be accountability. The 7th Parliament must be the voice and defender of the people. As ATM are going to introduce bills targeting the country's pressing issues. The first is a foreign agents bill that will be sponsored to designate all foreign-funded NGOs and entities as foreign agents. These NGOs and entities are actively in the political terrain on behalf of their foreign funders who want to advance foreign interests in our country. This measure is crucial to ensure that domestic policies and decisions are made by South Africans for South Africa without undue foreign influence. By identifying and regulating these foreign agents, we aim to safeguard our sovereignty and promote transparency. The people must govern, not foreign-funded NGOs. There must be a parliamentary inquiry to investigate certain matters in our country. The first is the rand manipulation and unethical practices of the banks. Parliament, as a voice of the people, needs to investigate the systematic impoverishment of our people by the banking sector. The George building collapse needs to have a parliamentary inquiry. 34 people died at George, and the country just kept it moving. The 6th Parliament violated Section 42(3) of the Constitution by failing to scrutinize the conduct of the President on the pallapala matter. The independent panel report has not been set aside by any court of law. That report must be thoroughly processed by Parliament. The GNU hypocrites who wanted Mr. Ramaphosa to account before the elections might change their minds now that they are in cabinet. Ama-weku-weku, ama-pitli-pitli, ama-mene-mene, ama-nyoro-nyoro. The President will account ethanda engathandi. Thank you.
I will now invite the Honorable, the Deputy Speaker.
Honourable Chairperson, meeting here today in a marquee tent on a parking area is symbolic in a number of ways. It bears testimony to the extremely challenging time we went through as Parliament during the 6th Parliament. No one could have foreseen the devastating virus that wreaked havoc throughout the world. None of us elected to serve in the 6th Parliament could have imagined that we would have to work from home. And just when we had sight of a possible return to normality, the unthinkable happened. The Parliament building, housing the National Assembly, offices and meeting venues, was razed to the ground. An event that placed the legislative authority of this country before one of its greatest challenges, something that could have been prevented. So, Chairperson, us meeting here in a marquee tent is testimony to a 6th Parliament that had to deal with challenges that none could have foreseen. But on a different level, today also symbolises a Parliament, the 7th Parliament, that will not be deterred by events, that will not give in to the possibly more convenient and comfortable option of going fully virtual whilst the NA building is being rebuilt. This venue, as imperfect as it may be, should be seen as this 7th Parliament's commitment to serve the people of South Africa, no matter what. Parliament should be seen to be working in service of our country and its people. Parliament's annual performance plan focuses on a new macro strategic framework for the 7th Parliament that positions Parliament to be a transformative Parliament based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. This framework is anchored on 5 pillars, namely a responsive Parliament, a caring Parliament, an intervening Parliament, collaborative engagement, and effective stakeholder engagement. However, within the context of a drastic budget cut, it will require a rethinking of how this Parliament will achieve what is envisaged in the strategic framework. The crux of the matter is, however, that for Parliament to work, for it to be a responsive, caring, and intervening collaborative Parliament, members of Parliaments have to work and have to be able to work. It is with this in mind that I considered the responsibilities that the Speaker has assigned to me as Deputy Speaker. It became clear that many of these matters have either not been fully optimized or have been neglected during the time of the pandemic and as a result of the budget constraints that Parliament is facing, or that they are just not considered or valued sufficiently for the critical role they play in allowing members to function optimally. As members of Parliament, we are expected to be at the top of our game. We have to be able to fully participate in the committees we serve in, to understand budgets and the budget process. We have to understand the legislative process and to be able to interrogate bills before committee. We also have to be able to exercise in-depth and comprehensive oversight. Members are seldom prepared for all these responsibilities, and Parliament has a role to play in enhancing the capacity of all members. As one of my assigned responsibilities, members' training and capacity building will have to be reassessed and a thorough study be done of what the needs of members really are, as well as the most cost-effective ways in which this can be addressed. As members of Parliament, we cannot fulfill our commitment to the people of the country if we are not able or capable of doing what is required of us. In this regard, the support, specifically research support, provided to committees in Parliament are also of critical importance. Another area is information and communication technology. As Parliament is moving towards the implementation of a greater level of a paperless digital online dispensation, so too members have to be trained and capacitated to use technology to the fullest extent. This will form part of training and capacity building going forward. And Honourable Marquee, you raised a very important issue regarding the issuing of devices, the tools of trade. This has to be addressed. It cannot be that you still don't have it. At the same time, Parliament itself has to proceed at a more rapid pace to ensure that we utilise the advantages of technology to improve Parliament's performance and our communication and interaction with the public. We have to embrace the possibilities of, for example, AI, but similarly, we have to be informed sufficiently to avoid the dangers inherent to AI. Another responsibility is something very close to my heart, and that is the language policy of Parliament and the implementation thereof. The 12 official languages are one of the greatest assets of our country and of Parliament. We should all be able to express ourselves in the language that we feel comfortable in. Dit was baie duidelik dat tydens die mini-sittings wat ons gehad het oor die begroting, dat daar groot frustrasie was oor die gebruik van ons eie tale, aangesien ons gelyktydig 3 verskillende komitees gehad het en ons nie voldoende tolkdienste gehad het nie. Dit is iets waarna ons moet kyk, ons sal moet nuut kyk daarna, ons sal moet kyk na nuwe tegnologie, sodat ons dit vir lede moontlik maak om in alle komitees en ook in alle sittings die taal van hulle keuse te kan gebruik. En ek wil ook vir die tolke sê, baie dankie vir die ongelooflike onbaatsigtige werk wat hulle verrig deur voltyds aan diens te wees vir hierdie belangrike taak. Again, we have to understand the reality of working within the confines of a drastically reduced budget allocation, which has a negative effect on what Parliament can provide. But this does not and cannot keep us from thinking new and working differently and more productively. Honourable Chairperson, Parliament has a lot of ground to cover in the 7th Parliament to regain the trust and respect of South Africans. It is our responsibility to regain that trust and responsibility. Of course, we don't have ideal conditions, as is evident today, but we have to make it work. We have to make sure that every rand spent in Parliament makes a positive, constructive contribution, and that we work on the basis of transparency and inclusivity. We have to do everything possible to enable members to be responsive and caring and to intervene when required. This 7th Parliament should embody the hope of all South Africans to live a life of dignity and prosperity. And this Parliament should set the tone. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I will now call Honourable Dagmore from ANC.
Thank you very much, House Chair. I'm not sure if our Leader of Government Business, the Deputy President, the Speaker is also here. Honourable members, I think we are all aware that Chapter 4 of the Constitution outlines very clearly the role of Parliament as that of making laws, ensuring that the executive organs of state account to it, and also maintaining oversight of the national executive, including the implementation of legislation. And when it comes to this House, we as the ANC members and comrades deployed in this House are committed to playing our role in regard to oversight without fear or favour. Now, as the ANC, we support this vote, but I think it's important, House Chair, just to also observe that when the DA Chief Whip spoke, he had some negative things to say about the pace at which the Parliament is being rebuilt. And then he made this comment and said that here in Cape Town, skyscrapers, go up very quickly. Now, I think we need to remind the Honourable Chief Whip of the DA that where his party is governing in George, they built a building that collapsed and killed over 30 people, and the Premier of his province has refused to actually appoint a commission of inquiry in George.
Honourable members, I'm sorry, Honourable Dagmore. Honourable members, please let us not drown the Speaker on the podium.
And then, thank you, Chair. The EFF has also come here and they've talked about the issue of moving Parliament. Now, I think all of us are aware that in terms of 42.6, an Act of Parliament needs to be introduced and passed to change the venue of Parliament. But so maybe the EFF, if they are serious about that, should bring that to this House. But kufuneka bayaqonda siza kuxelela abantu basentshona koloni kuba nina niyafuna ukuba niye eGauteng. How many jobs will be lost here? So let's not be emotional about this issue. Let's look at it. But we will tell the people of the Western Cape that the EFF wants to move this Parliament. But let's discuss it. And then, Honourable Douglas, the Black Industrialist Program is a program of the African National Congress. And by black, we mean African, coloured, and Indian. And that program is a policy of the ANC which started way back, and it in fact continues today. So let's not come here and make opportunist statements about this leader being more committed to black industrialists than the other, because African, coloured, and Indian black industrialists have been supported. And also it was the 6th administration, this Parliament, that actually passed a transformative piece of legislation in terms of the expropriation bill, something that the previous administration had not been able to do, and that bill provides for nil compensation and broadens the definition of expropriation of a 1966 piece of legislation. So this organization, the African National Congress, remains committed to the transformative process of our laws. So when laws are made by this House and assented to by the President, we need as members to ensure that we monitor implementation very closely. It's our responsibility to do this work without fear or favour, always guided by the oath of office we have assented to. Now, as the ANC, we are encouraged by the statement of intent which has been signed by all parties of the GNU. The statement of intent reaffirms the collective commitment to the founding values of this Constitution and its preamble. Among the foundational principles are those of social justice, of redress, and the alleviation of poverty. The statement of intent also makes it clear that the GNU will include cooperation, both at the executive level but also here in Parliament. And I think we need to pay tribute to the 6th Parliament as we say that that ANC members in this 7th Parliament will continue to support legislation which aims at transforming our society. Let's look. The previous 6th Parliament passed the National Health Insurance legislation, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, the Expropriation Bill, the Pension Fund Amendment Bill, which workers organized had been calling for. Prevention of hate crimes and hate speech was passed by this previous Parliament, and national laws on gender-based violence. And that is the transformative record of legislation that this House must continue. And I would indicate that we as the ANC are fully prepared to play that role and not take seriously some notion of us being so-called neoliberals. We're committed to change this country, to transform it, because we are busy with a national democratic revolution as the ANC. Thank you.
Thank you. Al-Jama. Is there a member from Al-Jama? NCC.
House Chair, honourable members, honourable Speaker, the NCC cannot support this budget. It cannot support this budget because it took our President 3 weeks to put together the so-called Government of National Unity, which gave small parties like ourselves very little time to scrutinise. But I will tell you what we picked up. What we picked up is that Parliament is not accessible to the public. Parliament works too slowly. For parties like us, for which everything is an urgency, things just don't get done quick enough. But in addition to that, a little bit of digging, Speaker, and you will, House Chair, sorry, you will find out that the company that was tasked with demolishing what was left of Parliament has a history of delays and has been fined for price fixing. When we delved a little deeper, Speaker, we found out that that Parliament has appointed a maintenance contractor, which is a construction company called Nalito. There's a difference between maintenance and construction, and that is a red flag to us. If this is how we are going to use the struggling taxpayers' money, Speaker, we cannot under any circumstances support this budget. The NCC, it reiterates its call for a state-owned construction company to do the major construction works. This construction company, Speaker, will employ bricklayers, carpenters, plumbers, and painters, and give these people a living wage with medical aid and a pension. At the moment, what we are doing is we are creating a handful of millionaires with every big construction project. Speaker, it is time that the people who do the toiling benefit. People like myself, construction workers, once our knees and our backs go, we end up in the cycle of generational poverty after having given your life to build this country. It is unfair. Speaker, I'm going to end with the following. As we have looked at this budget, and I speak to the GNU, in this budget, you have planted the seed of the second revolution. Because in this budget, you have ensured the oppression of our people for another 5 years. I can guarantee you, Speaker, that the hungry, the oppressed, the homeless, the illiterate, the waterless are coming. I want to caution you, Speaker, when I say to you that the battle lines in this Parliament have been drawn between those of us that embrace and cherish the values of the Freedom Charter and those of you who trample on it with your newfound comrades. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will now invite Honourable Mahlatsi, UAT. Honourable Mahlatsi.
Greetings, House Chair. Greetings to the Progressive Caucus. Kgotsong Afrika. The United African Transformation does not support this budget. We believe that the Parliament, by its very definition, should be a true mouthpiece of the people. It should echo the voices of the dispossessed, the landless, and the marginalized. Yet the current status quo falls short on a noble goal. Our legislative body must be more to bridge the gap between the governed and those who govern. This Parliament must ensure that the seventh administration cannot be seen as shielding the executive from accountability. We must uphold the principle of justice and fairness, ensure that no one is above the law, regardless of their position. Shielding the executive from accountability undermines the very essence of our democracy and erode the trust that our people have placed in us. The marginalized, those who struggle daily against the tide of poverty, unemployment, and lack of access to basic services, need a Parliament that is unwavering in its commitment to social justice. The Parliament must support the MPs and ensure that they create policies that uplift our people, provide free education, free health care, and economic opportunities. It is our duty to dismantle the barriers that keep so many of our fellow citizens trapped in poverty, in a cycle of poverty. In this House, political consideration and affiliation must never overshadow the primary duty to serve our people. Accountability must not be sacrificed at the altar of political expediency. When the executive is held to account, it is not the act of political maneuvering, but the fundamental exercise of our democratic responsibility. The executive reports to the Parliament because it is the Parliament that must embody the will of the people. I want to take this phrase from Dr. Sindani. That says, as Marxist, we look at issue from the class analysis. But with the GNU and the composition of white power, in the next 5 years, we must raise our black consciousness above our class consciousness. Kanimambo.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now call the House Chairperson, Honorable Follick.
Honorable House Chairperson, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Members of the Executive, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to express our deepest condolences on the passing of the former Secretary to the National Assembly, Mr. Casper Handik, who passed on the 14th of July 2024, as previously expressed by the Speaker and the Chairperson of Council. Mr. Handik, who retired in 2006 after an illustrious career, spanning 36 years, was a stalwart of parliamentary procedure and administration. As the House Secretary, he served as the procedural advisor to the presiding officers of the House and played a pivotal role in the administration of Assembly business. We extend our deepest sympathy to Mr. Handik's family, friends, colleagues, and the many members and political parties he served with his consummate professionalism, humility, impartiality, selflessness, and commitment to a rule-based engagement in parliamentary proceedings. Honourable members, in his address last Thursday on the occasion of the opening of Parliament and earlier today in the reply to the debate, President Cyril Ramaphosa stated, amongst other, and I want to quote, the importance of building a capable, ethical, developmental state, close quote. The President also stated, open quote, in 1994, we achieved a democratic breakthrough that many believed was impossible. As this Parliament, we must hold firm, close quote. With the Executive, honourable members, we have a shared but a different responsibility to harness our collective efforts and skills to address the triple challenge of poverty, inequality, and unemployment.
As Parliament, we as the legislative arm of the state must build on the work done previously to improve our efforts to represent the people, ensure executive accountability and process quality legislation in pursuit of a developmental state as espoused by the President. And to borrow the President's word, we must hold firm in terms of all three. Parliament's distinct oversight role must ensure that departmental strategic plans reflect measurable programs, timeframes, and budget allocation that is geared towards the attainment of the targets set out in the NDP, SDGs, and Agenda 2063. In particular, emphasis must be on the action that is required to adapt and mitigate against the destruction associated with climate change occurrences that proportionately affects poor people more than others. The Sixth Parliament identified a list of strategic priorities which this Parliament must build on, especially the additional attention that must be given to its core business, committees. Committees are often referred to as the engine rooms of Parliament. However, honourable members, low budget allocations, high vacancy rates in senior management, insufficient office space, lack of committee venues, and so forth, impact negatively on the output of the committees. Parliament surely cannot continue like this in its quest to fulfill its constitutional obligations as a separate, independent arm of the state when these challenges persist. The report on state capture noted certain deficiencies in parliamentary oversight and proposed measures to address this. Some of this refer to the committee system that require attention and the lack of monitoring and tracking of House resolutions. Others refer to matters of the Rules Committee, and that is currently being attended to in the Subcommittee on Rules. The various committees of the Sixth Parliament were seized with a number of issues specific to their mandates, and the Rules Committee received quarterly reports on the progress made on specific recommendations made by the Commission. To build on our successes and facilitate continuity, committees in the Sixth Parliament adopted legislative reports that can be utilized by the Seventh Parliament to ensure that members who start their first term get off on a solid footing, and also to allow those who continue and serve in new committees to get sufficient background information. In pursuit of our oversight and accountability, Parliament is supported by a number of independent public institutions, and these research reports, oversight findings and recommendations, as well as report on audit outcomes, will be very useful for members to do their work. I now want to turn to a very important matter that is one of the core businesses of Parliament and members of Parliament, and that is the lawmaking process. On Tuesday, the 30th of May, the Constitutional Court handed down judgment in an application brought by certain individuals, as well as the organizations that they represent. The applicants apply directly to the court for an order to declare a certain piece of legislation, the Traditional and Khoisan Leadership Act 3 of 2019, unconstitutional. Honourable members, although Parliament has a discretion to determine the manner in which it must fulfill its obligations to facilitate public participation, the processes followed must be reasonable. This is the standard for public involvement established by the court in previous judgment. On an assessment of the public participation processes followed by Parliament, the court held that Parliament and the provincial legislators overwhelmingly failed to fulfill their constitutional obligations to facilitate a reasonable public participation process. The question is, what are we going to do in the Seventh Parliament to address this? Disappointingly, this judgment comes after Parliament and the legislative sector collectively spent approximately more than 20 million rand on public participation processes, which proved now to be futile. Glaringly, poor and insufficient record keeping in their administration made it impossible for the parliamentary legal services to file comprehensive papers and supporting documents with the court. What we need to do, and that will be addressed, is the following. We must now focus on the quality of public participation. In this respect, the Honourable Speaker has designated public participation as one of the key performance indicators in her office, and that is assigned to a House Chairperson responsible for committees and oversight. The remedial measures is aimed to address the systemic weaknesses in the committee system as pointed out by the court. It's also geared to ensure professional administrative support and execution of public participation processes that strive towards quality and excellence in the lawmaking process in Parliament. Honourable members, as I move towards conclusion, we must be mindful that many South Africans remain beset by poverty with limited opportunities for a better life, and economic growth is still stubbornly slow. Crime and violence have become a commonplace in our communities. The Nigerian poet and novelist Ben Okri said, and I want to quote, "Human life has equal value. Our collective efforts as parliamentarians must be geared towards improving the lives of our people, especially the poor and the economically marginalized in society, to indeed ensure that human life has equal value." And I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Follick. I will now invite Honorable Notata from DA.
Somlomo malunga bekekileyo bantu baseMzantsi Afrika ndiyanibulisa ngale njikalanga molweni. Chair, the theme for the Government of National Unity focuses on builders versus breakers. And as a member of a key party of that unity, it would be remiss of me to not look at Parliament through the same lens. We must never forget that being members of Parliament and the executive is not just a great privilege. It comes with great responsibility. Something too often forgotten by some in this House, it seems. We need to learn from the past if we want to build a successful future for all South Africans. In the sixth Parliament was filled with both builders and breakers. Unfortunately, it often seems that there were more of the latter than the former. We saw this in the willful dereliction of duties or rubber stamping of harmful legislation. We saw this when committees undertook public participation at an average cost of 300,000 per public hearing per district, a whopping 900,000 per province, but refused to listen to the input of the people. We saw this when committees flaunted procedure in order to push through legislation. The National Health Insurance Act and the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill would surely not have survived the process if the Health and Basic Education Committees took their duties of facilitating public participation or the work of the National Council of Provinces seriously. Instead of taking on board the inputs from experts, civil society, and the people of South Africa in those respective industries, the NHI and Bella bills were steamrolled through Parliament, hardly giving the NCOP time to do its job before steamrolling it through there too. So the question is, why spend money if the intention is to simply ignore the inputs or rubber stamp legislation? This culture in this seventh Parliament has to change, so as to give the due diligence in the legislative making process and make sure that we hear all those that are involved. We as members of Parliament need to understand that what we do is not removed from the struggles of our people. It has a direct impact on their lives and can either make it better or infinitely worse. Whether we build or break is not just a political chess game. It affects whether we have reliable power supply for our homes and businesses, whether we have safe and reliable water in our homes, whether our ports can import and export goods without hassles, whether our children can read, write, and do basic mathematics and can learn in safe environments that inspire them for the future. It affects whether the economy is enabled to grow and people have jobs, our ability to effectively fight crime and fix broken infrastructure. It affects whether people are able to put food on the table and fight poverty. And for too many South Africans, the answer still remains a resounding no. But we have an opportunity now, a rare chance to turn the Titanic before we hit the iceberg. It will be hard work. It will take unprecedented cooperation and trust, but we can make this work. That is why when we give constructive criticism, it's because we want to build together. but not to call out anyone specifically. It will require a different mindset from us all. It will require the study of international best practices to ensure that our government of national unity not only goes the distance, but sows prosperity along the way. We will need patience, innovation, and trust that all GNU parties have South Africa's best interests at heart and is not looking for any excuses or loopholes to enrich themselves while vulnerable citizens suffer. We must ensure that we are worthy of the trust that South Africans has placed in us. That is why we must revive the coalition bills so that as legislators, we are able to set laws that will guide how we form government in the future, to provide certainty, stability where no party has a majority. We must not only fix the National Assembly building that went up in flames, but also build up the institution of Parliament by ensuring that all vacancies are filled with permanent personnel to support the critical work we do of oversight and lawmaking. Parliament must be robust and deal with the issues of South Africans. We must hold the executive to account and members of Parliament, including making sure that we shield this institution from questionable characters that have been pitched elsewhere. In that regard, we agree with the Honorable Mawuto of the EFF that accountability is key. That is why, as the DA, we have written to the Police Portfolio Committee regarding the stalled VBS investigation. SAPS must explain to the committee why they failed to provide any updates on the state of the investigations 6 years after the DA-led criminal charges against the EFF honorable members sitting in this House. Again, over allegations of corruption and industrial-scale looting of the now-defunct VBS Bank. In the case of VBS, as with all cases of alleged corruption, including state capture, it is poor and vulnerable citizens who suffer the most. It is the people we are meant to serve. Not a single member of Parliament is here on their own behest. We are honored to serve because voters have decided to put us here. So, Madam Speaker, as the Deputy Chief Whip of the second largest party in Parliament, I can assure you that our caucus team looks forward to working with all those who seek to build so we can tangibly change people's lives for the better on the ground. The DA will use this House to ensure that we build Parliament and we make sure that this Parliament is a Parliament of builders or not breakers. Asizangobhidliza apha, sizokokha ikamva labantu baseMzantsi Afrika. Ndiyabulela.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now call Honorable Lucas from ANC.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair, Speaker of the National Assembly, Deputy Speaker, our Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Paul Mashatile, members of the National Assembly, our guests, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I think we said we're speaking about vote 2, about Parliament. And fortunately, all of us are members of Parliament. So even if we differ today, we will still be operating as Parliament. Can we get that assurance, Speaker? Anyone who doesn't want us will still be working with us, and we thank them for that. I just want, before I start with my speech, I really just want to ask members to be very calm. Really, it can happen that we can get strokes and heart attacks here. And we are very, very cautious about that. Speaker, please, our health and wellness, we must make sure that all members understand that very, very, very clearly. I've not mentioned anyone's name, so please don't come back to me personally. Let me start. South Africa's foreign policy is an expression of the country's domestic public policy, which projects the democratic values of our nation. These values are entrenched in the provisions of the 1996 Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, which affirm the right of the South African society to live in dignity, equality, democracy, and freedom. In this light, South African Parliament's international engagement supports and reflects the values enshrined in our Constitution. These values also find expression in the aspirations of the AU Agenda 2063 strategy, the SADC RISDP, and South Africa's National Development Plan, NDP, Vision 2030. Honorable members, Parliament's strategic plan has over the years placed prime importance on increasing its capacity to represent the interests of South Africa in the international arena. The evolving geopolitical landscape globally has also enabled the South African Parliament to play a critical role in repositioning and advancing national interests in the global arena. Through our work in the global arena, we have further sought to promote and facilitate the transformation of undemocratic governance structures and participate in rule-based systems, which seeks to democratize multilateral institutions processes. As we have done in the past, we must continue to focus on building strategic partnership around mutual interests while promoting internationalism and solidarity. We need to ensure that we place at the center of our work the interconnectedness of challenges amongst African countries, specifically, and developing nations, to find African solutions for African problems. We must therefore place at the core of our work the importance of economic diplomacy as an important lever to advance inclusive economic growth amongst nations of the Global South, while using interparliamentary diplomacy as a tool to advance engagement and partnership. We must continue to provide leadership on matters that seek to entrench democratic values, social justice, the rule of law, and fundamental human rights. Furthermore, gender equality, development of women and youth are equally important priorities as we continue to engage on international platforms. On the African arena and agenda, we must ensure continued strategic participation in the South African Development Community Parliamentary Forum and the Pan-African Parliament. We need to deepen participation in interparliamentary multilateral relations processes, which includes the South-South cooperation and North-South relations, as manifested by the South African Parliament's engagement in the Interparliamentary Union. Furthermore, in the context of the IPU, we must ensure that we strategically prioritize the importance of the non-aligned movement as a critical instrument of coordination amongst the nations of the global site. Honorable members, the recent ICJ ruling that Israel's long-term occupation of Palestinian territory are unlawful and further declaring that it amounted to de facto annexation is indeed an overwhelming victory for the people of Palestine and for South Africa, who drove that specific agenda. It also affirms South Africa's position on this matter, which we have consistently raised on the IPU assembly platforms. This brave step by the South African government greatly contributed to our ability as representatives at the Interparliamentary Union to unite Africa as well as the Arab region, as well as the Middle East, at the recent IPU conference, where we were able to make sure that South Africa really take leadership as a country that carry the interests of the world. And it is in line with our objective of making sure that we have a better world order. Honorable members, further engagement on international fora platforms includes our participation in the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, where our former Deputy Speaker, the Honorable Lechisa, served as an executive member responsible for gender. I have also been deployed by the same Commonwealth Parliamentary Association to induct the Kenyan Parliament recently after the elections. The Africa, Caribbean, Pacific, European Union, as well as parliamentary bilateral relations. As we deepen parliamentary diplomacy and multilateralism in the 7th Parliament, we must continue to do so, guided by the imperative to advance South Africans' national interests. Honorable Speaker, the hosting of the 9th BRICS Parliamentary Forum saw the adoption of the Memorandum of Understanding to coordinate efforts aimed at developing and strengthening the interparliamentary relation of BRICS member states concerning issues of common interest, amongst other things. In building on the progress that we have made in the past, it would be important to ensure that we revive our parliamentary diplomacy focus groups to ensure that we consistently assess the efficacy and impact of our engagement to ensure sustained and strategic alignment to South Africans' interests on the global arena. The future of the South Africa's effective parliamentary diplomacy will require Parliament to be more proactive in advancing South Africa's national foreign policy objectives at the bilateral and multilateral parliamentary forms of engagement. This will require...
Honorable Lucas, your time has expired.
This will require strategic processes and procedures to ensure that Parliament's international engagement are processed in a
Honorable
streamlined
Lucas.
way, as is done with all domestic engagement. The ANC supports this budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will now invite the Honorable, the Speaker of Parliament. Speaker, you saved 5 minutes from the opening of the debate, so you've got 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson and honorable members. Firstly, I would like to thank all the members who participated in the debate. Even if some of you may not have accepted this budget, which is really responsible for your upkeep, your operational work, I do appreciate that you raise these concerns to highlight what are the important issues that we must continue to address as this Parliament. So I don't take it negatively. I realize that what we are doing is to exactly engage on the debate that we feel as this Parliament need to engage on to bring those issues that comes from our communities. Some of the engagement may not have been relevant in this debate, but they were necessary to flag what are those important issues that our communities are engaged about. Honorable House Chairperson, I do want to say, listening to all those who debated, it was very clear that we are at one about what is the role of Parliament. We also reflected on what are the weaknesses that Parliament as an institution must address in order to enable it to do its business of lawmaking, of oversight, and accountability. Honorable members, I do wish to indeed accept that in the beginning of the 7th Parliament and the work that we had to do, there might have been some glitches which did not allow us to undertake effective oversight, particularly as we engaged on the budget debates, as members have said. We will consider the proposal that has been made by members that it might be necessary to look at the transitional arrangement, particularly after the elections. How much time do we actually allow committees to do their work? There was also a proposal that we might need to look at the legislation to ensure that maybe the timelines in that period when we have elections is extended such that the budget and the budget debates are done in a manner that allows us to properly give oversight. There are also issues that have been raised by members about how we need to strengthen each other's capacity on lawmaking, and actually encouraging members that beyond the executive, which at times brings legislation, we too, as lawmakers, we have a responsibility to bring our legislation through the private members' bill. And Parliament, as an institution, does support members who wish to table private members' bill in order to address some gaps that they might have observed in our legislative framework. Issue of strengthening public participation was also highlighted by members in the debate, and we accept that we'll look at what it is that we can do more to ensure that this indeed is done. I also want to say members have highlighted the need for prioritizing the rebuilding program of Parliament, but also added the need for further construction of office space that would allow members to have offices adequate enough for them to do their work, as well as committee rooms. We will take up these issues, particularly on the Joint Standing Committee of Parliament, to see what is feasible. One of the members raised an important issue that we need, given the resources that we have, to look at what we can do more given those resources. It will indeed require us to reprioritize what are certain things that
are important that we might need to start with in any given year, given the resources that we have. But I want to assure members, we are continuing the debate with National Treasury to make sure that Parliament is properly funded as another arm of state. One of the members also encouraged us to be vigilant when we appoint service providers to look at their capacity and their capabilities and whether or not they are actually fit for purpose. Honorable members, we may not have all appreciated that we need to be in a permanent space. And as some of you have said, we can't be proud that we're meeting in a Marquee. But it was a way in which we had to address the needs from members who actually said at the end of the 6th administration, they would want to have more physical meetings as opposed to the virtual meeting. So we are trying to address precisely that. So noba ngabe babu Hadebe si kule ntente kungathi kukamcimbi kaHadebe. Nomcimbi wo Hadebe noma usententeni noko umsebenzi uyaqhuba. Inyama ithitshiwa kube nezinto ezinye ezenzakalayo kodwa ifana nendlu okwethutshana ngelo xesha singakamnayo. Ndithembe ke malunga eParliament uba sizawuqhuba nakwezo zinto enisihlobise ngazo senze njengangoko ukude kwenzeke oko okuzizimfuno zabahlali esibamele. Mandibulele ke kuni nonke malunga, ndibulele nakubasebenzi bale Parliament ngomsebenzi abawenzayo noma ngamanye amaxesha singaboni ukuba batsala nzima kodwa sithanda ukubulela kubo sithi nangamso ningadinwa bethuna. Asifuna ukunigcina ke apha kude kube sebusuku. Ndiyazi ba kukhona injejane apha esathanda ukobuka ibeach nantoni. Oh, ilanga likakatshoni ndithembe ukuthi nizakwenza njalo kodwa nikhumbule uba ngomso lixesha lokuphangela. Enkosi.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable members, before we conclude the debate, I would like to refer members to Rule 82. In the House and in mini plenary sessions, members must refer to one another in respectful terms. Roman figure 2, further to sub-rule 1, no member may refer to any other member by his or her name only. No name to impugn the dignity of any member may be used. Can we please, honorable members, I am pleading with you, let us refrain from doing so, because it is unparliamentary to call other honorable members with names that are not referred to in the rules. Can we adhere to the rules, please? That concludes the debate. Honorable members, we will now take orders number 2 to 41 together as they appear on the order paper. These are reports of portfolio committees on budget votes. As has been the practice, there will be no declaration of votes on these reports. I will allow parties to indicate their objections to specific reports should they wish to do so. I now recognize the Honorable, the Chief Whip, Honorable Ntuli.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Good afternoon to you and the Deputy President and all honorable members. Chairperson, I move that the report be adopted. Thank you.
Chairperson.
Honorable Vessels.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. I know that there are new members in the House, but I do want to ask you to call the attention to all members that it's against the rules to cross the floor in the House, and it's a very bad practice to do such. So I ask you to please inform the new members in the House of that.
Thank you, Honorable Vessels. Honorable members, in fact, when we cross the floor, you can bow down to show the respect, and then you cross over to the other side instead of just crossing over and not adhering to the rules.
Couldn't see Reddy, he was camouflaged.
Honorable Ngubane.
Honorable Chair, we object the report read by the Chief Whip of the GNU.
Honorable Ngubane. Please allow me to finish, because I would have asked that the motion is that the reports be adopted, and then you come and then you raise your hand and then you say that you object to a report. Honorable Ngubane, I am addressing you and you are conversing with other members, so I'm not sure whether you are hearing me or not, because I want you to specifically say on which report are you, which one you are rejecting, but not now, not now. I had not finished yet. Honorable members, I want us to, no, let us be gentle with the other honorable members who are new, because this is not a parliament precinct. So they do not know that when you go around that side, you must not actually cross. Can all honorable members please go around the tent, because there are doors on that side, you go around the tent or you go around this tent, but do not cross the floor here, please. The motion is that the reports be adopted. Are there any objections? I think you can come now. Honorable Ngubane, is it Dr. Mulder? No. Okay, yes, honorable member.
Chairperson, it's not Dr. Mulder.
Oh, Honorable Philip.
And I'm very pleased that you made an endeavor to correct your original ruling on the matter raised by Honorable Vessels. This is Parliament, and you don't cross the floor. Even if you bow, you come in from this side or that side, but you do not cross the floor. So even though they're new members, don't mislead them. Give them the right ruling from the beginning, then we all know what we're supposed to do. Thank you.
Honorable Philip, I think I have corrected that ruling, and I did say, unless you were not listening, I did say that since they are new members, can we all use round on the tent and then use our exit doors as they are in there, but do not cross the floor. I did say that. Are there any objections to the reports as presented? Honorable Ngubane.
Chair, I did say, as MK, we object the report as presented by the Chief Whip of the GNU.
Can you please specify which report you are objecting?
All of them, Chair. It's
okay,
all the report.
Are there any other objections? Honorable Shivambu.
House Chair, please note the objection of the economic freedom fighters on all the reports from Order 1 until Order number 41. So we object to all the reports that are tabled. Please note that.
I have noted the objections of the MK and the objections of the EFF. Honorable Philip.
House Chair, we are not going to object to the reports, the contents of the reports, because we understand it's a transition period and that this has been compressed. But we do object to the manner in which the reports were presented to us. Some of them simultaneously with the sitting of a meeting. Now that does not give this Parliament an opportunity to interact effectively with those reports. Please record our objection to the manner in which they were tabled to us. Thank you.
Honorable Trollip, are you objecting to the reports? Because it is the reports that are presented, and it's either you reject the reports or you are in favor of.
Honourable Chair, you obviously didn't hear me. I said we're not objecting to the reports, but
I heard
the
you
manner in
quite-
which they were tabled.
I heard you quite frankly. All I'm asking is, were you objecting to the reports? Because you gave a statement after that. But it's fine. We'll then take it that, it's all rejections to the report.
No, not.
Okay, honorable members, we'll then take it that Honorable Troblip, as you are not rejecting to the reports. Are there any further objections? Honorable Swart, Honorable Zungula.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, as is the practice in the past, I will provide the desk with a list of our objections. But at this stage, just for record purposes, we wish to note our objection to Report 2, 3, 10, 13, 16, 17, 21, 22, 23, 32, 34, 35, 36, 38. There are a number which we are not objecting to, but I will provide a list to the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Swart. Honorable Zungula.
Thank you, Chair. Please register that ATM objects to the report zonke. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Zungula. Are there any further objections? None. Honorable members, I request members to stand and wait for the chair. What? Sorry, honorable members. With all the objections noted, the reports are agreed to. You nearly killed me. I request members to stand and wait for the chair and the maids to leave the chamber. That concludes the business of the day, and the House is adjourned.